conspiracy. Samenzwering. Plannen smeden tegen de wereld, tegen de overheid of tegen de mensen. Daar zijn heel veel boeken over geschreven, maar Robert Anton Wilson is wel de meest bekende schrijver van de conspiracy novels. Zijn Illuminati-trilogie is heel bekend. Maar hij heeft veel meer geschreven en is gefascineerd door het idee dat samenzwering in de wereld natuurlijk of onnatuurlijk, bewust of onbewust ontstaan. Hij is een aardige man en hij woont in San Francisco en daar interviewden we. Samenzwering dus. Wat is dat?
What fascinates you in conspiracies?
It is an interesting area because between the paranoids who believe there's one big conspiracy that runs the world and they are clever enough to have figured out which one it is, and the total deniers who say, oh, any conspiracy theory must be nuts, must be paranoid. There's a great deal of other positions you can take, such as the position, for instance, of one of the groups I'm studying for my encyclopedia of conspiracy theories, Albionic Research. They believe there are two major conspiracies fighting over the world, the Vatican and the British royal family. And everybody, every other conspiracy or corporation or government or affinity group in the world is either part of one or the other, whether they know it or not. You're either working for the British royal family or the Vatican, whether you know it or not. And then there are multiple conspiracy theories which begin to make a lot more sense to me. There was a district attorney I met at Essel in a New Age workshop center where I was teaching a workshop, and this DA told me that anytime there's a land deal in any American town, there are 24 conspiracies immediately start fighting over who's going to make the biggest profit out of it. And I think that's a reasonable figure. I can't believe in any conspiracy theory that involves less than 24 conspiracies, because people just, the idea of one major conspiracy just doesn't make sense to me, and even two doesn't quite do it. It's like H.L. Mencken's attitude towards religion. He couldn't believe in atheism because the universe is not quite that chaotic. It's like, atheism is like saying if you throw all the junk over the wall for 4.5 billion years, it'll turn into a computer in full working order connected to the net. And then there's monotheism, which says there's one controlling intelligence, which is like the paranoid conspiracy theories. And Mencken couldn't see any evidence of one controlling intelligence any more than he could see total chaos. So he decided polytheism made the most sense. There's a committee, and they disagree with each other frequently. And that's the way I feel about conspiracies. There are lots of them going on, but there's no one big conspiracy controlling everything.
And is it so that in practical conspiracies that things get out of hand? Because take the drug scene, that seems to be going in some direction and governments involved and big money and whatever. But on the other hand, they seem to be a chaotic lot and fighting among themselves.
Yeah, well, that's the way it is with most. You look at the biggest documented conspiracy, one that's not a matter of conjecture or speculation by professional conspiracy buffs, one that really went into court, the periode conspiracy in Italy, where a bunch of third degree...
Like a Masonic lodge in Italy that was very powerful and killed people. And
yeah, they got 900 members of the government into that lodge. It was called the Periode Lodge of the Egyptian Lodge of the Grand Orient Lodge of Egyptian Freemasonry, to give them their full title. And Periode had 900 people in the government, including the head of the secret police, who was supposed to be observing subversive movements. He was part of this subversive movement. They were planning a fascist coup, which they were financing with dope money, laundering drug money through the Banco Ambrosiano and the Vatican Bank by means of Roberto Calvi, the president of Ambrosiano, and Archbishop Marcinkus, the president of the Vatican Bank at that time. That was a real conspiracy. And how did that end up? Calvi is left hanging from a bridge, apparently killed by the mafia in some complicated double cross. Sindona was convicted in New York of 55 counts of stock and currency fraud, convicted in Rome of murdering a bank examiner, and then was poisoned in his cell. And the rest, General Mussolini died suddenly while he was under investigation. And I think that's the way most conspiracies work in the real world, as distinguished from paranoid theories. Most conspiracies end up devouring themselves.
Yeah. But you were the one who, like in Illuminati, the Illuminatus trilogy, pictured a whole jungle of conspiracies that in fact ran the world and had a hand in most things, like the killing of Kennedy or whatever happened in that time frame.
Well, Illuminatus had to have an end, so at the end it turns out there are two major conspiracies, but...
I think the gardeners are coming in again. The Illuminatus trilogy was written when?
1969 and 70, and then it took 5 years to find a publisher. It was rewritten slightly in 74 to bring it up to date just before publication. That's how the references to Nixon got into it, for instance. When it was written, it was mostly during the reign of LBJ. That was the time when I felt most strongly that the most paranoid conspiracy theories might be true, because America was so weird in those days. It's still weird, but it's not quite that weird.
There's now other fields of activity, like the computer industry, where you could think that the conspiracy thing happens. We're all coerced in getting into Windows, which means Bill Gates' Windows to the world. How do you see that?
Well, in the research we're doing on the Encyclopedia of Conspiracy Theories, I find there's a hell of a lot of people who either believe that Bill Gates is the Antichrist, or they hate him so much that they're saying that, whether they believe it or not. I think it's kind of funny to imagine the Antichrist as the head of a computer company, but, well, why not? That's one of the things we're going to have to cover in the encyclopedia. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about computers. There's the crypto space, which is the part of cyberspace that nobody can find because it's been encoded, and nobody knows what's going on there. I hear rumors about alternative societies growing up in crypto space with their own money, which means that the government never gets any record of it, and God knows how many people are evading taxes that way, and how many countries...
By for instance, exchanging services without telling the tax people.
Well, they're using their own kind of crypto money in crypto space, you know. And then there's this crazy business about the attempts to censor the net, which we actually passed a bill in this country last year in Congress. And the only way they can enforce that is if they start invading European countries and seizing people who are putting stuff online that they disapprove of. Now, they did that to Panama. Mm-hmm. But I don't think our government is crazy enough to invade France or Germany or Nederland or anywhere over there. They're not that crazy. So the law is just something that Congress did because they were too stupid to understand how the net operates. But it's going to be funny watching them try to enforce it.
But don't you think that governments, or the American government, is actually trying to sneak into what is in computers all over the world? I mean, there are technical ways to do that.
Well, it's another thing that we're investigating for the encyclopedia. There's a lot of people who believe that you can't do anything on the computer without the government knowing about it. I just don't believe the government is that well staffed. I have plenty of evidence in my own lifetime that the government is overworked, understaffed, and generally confused. And I'm just not as paranoid about the government as most people. I don't think the government is my friend. I don't think I don't love it and trust it like you're supposed to, but I don't think they're competent enough to really spy on all of us as effectively as most paranoid theories complain. They don't know what's going on most of the time. Well, take the simple level of police enforcement. The last time I calculated in a big city I was living in, there was one cop to every 400 citizens. How the hell can one cop know everything that 400 citizens are doing?
No, but the people who believe in this conspiracy idea say, yeah, but many people feed in as a snitch, or they have other ways, and even the mafia and the bad guys tell the police that if you, as a seemingly correct citizen, will do something that they don't like, You start making money of crime, they'll tell the police. So that there is, in fact, a whole web of things.
Well, yeah, the mafia and the government are sort of interchangeable these days. I don't know how it is in Europe, but over here...
About as worse as here.
Yeah, well, ever since they made the OSS, which was the predecessor of the CIA, they made a deal with Lucky Luciano for the mafia to help in the invasion of Italy at the end of World War II. And ever since then, the American intelligence community and the mafia have been intertwined in so many ways. As a matter of fact, the Pay Due scandal in Italy involved both the CIA and the mafia and their weird cocaine and heroin deals. So I really don't think you can draw a sharp line and say this is the government and this is the mafia. They sort of overlap. There's a gray area where the government and the mafia are the same people.
Now, as a writer, I think you pioneered, before the word was actually there, hypertext in hyperlinks in history, because your trademark is that you took seemingly innocent little bits of historic events and then you linked them together in a way that at least shook our reality a bit.
Well, I think a lot of my literary techniques derive from James Joyce. And it's very interesting that a lot of the people writing about computers and literature claim Joyce was writing in hypertext before hypertext existed. Finnegan's Wake is sort of hypertext all on one page. You don't click to go to another page.
I don't know. I always saw that as a sequential changing of point of view, because that's what he did. He changed the point of view of the story from the one guy walking through the street with the dog. He would change to another person seeing the guy with the dog. So is that hypertext, or was it just serializing realities?
Well, I feel that Joyce is sort of somewhere between hypertext and postmodernism. He was way the hell ahead of his own time, and I think I first realized I was a postmodernist when a professor told me at a university somewhere back east, I think in North Carolina. I looked it up, and by God, I am a postmodernist, but so was Joyce. I didn't set out to be a postmodernist. Like Joyce, I just don't believe in the omniscient narrator who sees all, knows all, and tells the reader the truth. You can't find anybody like that in the real world, so why should you pretend one exists in the novel? My novels are all like Joyce's. There's a variety of narrative voices. You can't trust any of them completely. Another artist who's influenced me a lot is Orson Welles, especially his last completed film, F for Fake, in which everybody is lying, including Orson himself. Part of the time. You never know who's lying just exactly when.
Well, what animal comes to mind when you say it? It feels like you really are like what the Mexican call the coyote type. You're pulling the legs, the trickster.
Well, actually, Jean Shimoda Boland wrote a book, Gods in Every Man. She wrote another one, Goddesses in Every Woman. And Gods in Every Man, I found out the god that's most powerful in me is Hermes, who's the trickster god. Hermes is related to Mercury and to Coyote and to Hanuman in the Hindu tradition, and to all sorts of Bugs Bunny in the popular art. They're all related. And writers and in my tradition, like Joyce and going back earlier, Swift and so on, they were trickster figures, so they were hermetic. As a matter of fact, what's called hermetic literature is very much like what I write.
Yeah, because the feeling was at one time that if you read your books, you would learn something esoteric, something hidden there that wasn't there. And my personal experience was that I became aware of how many realities there are. That one story about one reality is not the reality. And maybe police people know that because if they have witnesses of a certain accident, it's always different. But for me, it was opening my eyes to the fact that no event can be described impartially, as it happened, objectively.
Yeah, well, I got that, as I said, from Joyce, but also from Korzybski, the founder of General Semantics, which shows how everybody creates their own reality tunnel. Whatever you look at, you see it your way, not the way somebody else would see it. And then, of course, there was the LSD revolution in the 60s, in which I was an enthusiastic participant, and That's one thing everybody gets out of LSD, is the realization that things are much more complicated than we generally realize, and there's more ways of looking at them than we generally think of.
Okay, this was Robert Daniel Wilson about conspiracy and craziness in America today, too.
Well, I don't think America's the worst place. There are other places even worse, like South Korea, North Korea, Iraq. There are quite
Singapore.
Singapore. Yeah, Singapore is one of the worst, absolutely.
Yeah.
The best, according to a UN study, in terms of human rights and general welfare, is Canada. So that's one of the reasons I'm thinking of moving to Canada. I don't have to learn another language if I move to Canada.
You don't have to in Amsterdam. Thank you for your interview.
You're quite welcome.